I'm Sally Howard. I'm the chair of the Department of Social Sciences and professor of political science. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming to our 2025 Constitution Day event. September 17th is the date that we commemorate the signing of the U.S. Constitution in 1787. And at Concord, we always have an event on campus to commemorate that and celebrate that and hopefully teach the students in the community a little bit more about some aspect of the Constitution. The event is put on by Concord, it's organized by the political science program, and it is hosted tonight by the students of Pi Sigma Alpha, which is the National Political Science Honor Society. Those are the students handing out constitutions at the front and the students who will be opening and closing tonight's event. Emily.
Hello and welcome everyone. It is my honor to introduce our speaker tonight, Billy Wolf. Billy Wolf is the Communications Director for the ACLU of West Virginia. A fifth-generation Appalachian, he brings a love of storytelling to the struggle for social justice. He describes himself as a recovering journalist, having reported for numerous regional and national publications for over a decade before leaving media to work in advocacy. Prior to ACLU-WV, Billy handled communications and worked as a community organizer for Fairness West Virginia, a statewide LGBTQ+ civil rights organization. Before that, he handled communications for the West Virginia Conservation Agency. In addition to this role as communications director, Billy also co-founded the Appalachian Queer Youth Summit, a summer camp for LGBTQ+ high schoolers who are interested in advocacy. He is a graduate of West Virginia University's Pearlie Isaac Reed School of Journalism and a recipient of the Rainbow Pride of West Virginia Power of One Award, as well as numerous West Virginia Press Association awards. He lives on Charleston's west side with his spouse and her pets. And now please join me in a big mountain lion welcome for Mr. Billy Wolf.
Hello. Thank you, Emily. Thank you to all of you for being here, especially to Dr. Howard for inviting me here tonight. As Dr. Howard said, my name is Billy Wolf, or as Emily said, my name is Billy Wolf, and I'm with the American Civil Liberties Union of West Virginia. Or, as commenters on our Facebook have so lovingly described us in recent weeks, the Anti-Christian Lawyers Union, the American Commie Lovers Union, and perhaps my personal favorite, simply the Gay CL Jew. I'm glad to see you all tonight. I assume you wouldn't be here if you didn't have at least a passing interest in the Constitution or care about the future of our democracy. I know you're tired. I know I'm tired. We're all tired of politics, emotionally, physically, spiritually bedraggled by the mention of politics at this point. And I hate to depress you further, but I'm here to tell you that everything in life is political. From when the pothole on your street gets filled, to whether your tap water is safe to drink, to whether your tax dollars are being spent to bomb women and children in a foreign country, politics is at the center of it all. But I do hope that tonight I can at least leave you with some encouraging thoughts, and I hope I can reassure you that we are in fact in this together, even when we disagree, that we've been here before and we will come out of this collectively stronger, better, kinder, more resilient. It's easy sometimes to forget that we're not alone in navigating these scary times. So, what are we as Americans? What defines us, or what should define us as a people? We don't have a universally shared ethnic background or an ancient history we can collectively trace. We're only a couple of hundred years old as a nation, and some of us are just getting here. So what are we? Who are we? I think what should define us, at least in part, is this great agreement that we have, this social contract that our forebears forged and that we've been working so hard to diligently improve and even perfect. Our great agreement starts with our Constitution, and it becomes the understanding we all have with each other, that we can live side by side with people with whom we may not agree, with whom we may not share a religion, who might love differently than we do, and yet we can still be part of a greater whole as long as we aren't trying to harm each other. We can still send our kids to the same schools and shop at the same grocery stores and attend the same concerts and drive on the same roads and not be identical versions of each other. And yes, I think this notion is founded firmly in the fact that we are stronger because of our diversity and not in spite of it. I'm worried that we've started to renege on our agreement. We find ourselves in some pretty scary times. Right now, we share in a great big mess of a country. But I do have hope. Utah Phillips was a union organizer, a member of the industrial workers of the world, who became a dedicated pacifist after serving in Korea. He was a drifter and a poet, and he helped build the Joe Hill House of Hospitality when he was involved with the Catholic worker movement. He was also a folk singer known as the golden voice of the Great Southwest, and he described his vision for a better tomorrow as a metaphorical ship that was always being built. The ship was worked on by the hands of the great Americans, people like Sojourner Truth. She was born into slavery, but escaped and sued for her son's freedom, becoming the first black woman to win a case against a white man all the way back in the 1820s. It was worked on by people like Mother Jones. Mother Jones, the miner's mother, who was more agitator than organizer. She lived to be 100, saw Abraham Lincoln speak when she was a young woman, and she died on the eve of the New Deal. She once stared down a militia in Ludlow, Colorado, all by herself. And Theodore Roosevelt called her the most dangerous woman in America. It was worked on by people like Eugene Debs. Please know the name Eugene Debs. Eugene Debs, who stood trial for resisting the First World War, and as they were taking him off to jail, he looked at the judge and he said, "While there is a lower class, I am in it. While there is a criminal class, I am of it. While there is a soul in prison, I am not free." And it was worked on by Paul Robeson. There was almost nothing Paul Robeson couldn't do. In 1915, he was the first and only black student at Rutgers, was a football star, a baritone singer, a stage actor, a beloved peace activist. Paul took the stage there in Peekskill, New York in 1949 to sing about peace while 1,000 Ku Klux Klanners burned his effigy, threw rocks at concertgoers, and called for his lynching. It's hard to even conceive of that kind of bravery. And it should be emphasized that in a supposedly enlightened society, no one should ever have to be that brave. We've got to remember these good people, and we've got to remember our long history. We're living in times when the power structure wants us to forget the past. Just yesterday, the Washington Post reported that the Trump administration has flagged for removal more than 24 signs and artifacts from the Harpers Ferry National Historical Park because they mention slavery, the abolitionist John Brown, or both. This is deeply and profoundly morally repugnant. But back to the metaphorical ship. These people were building a ship, Utah would say, and he said they knew they would never sail on it, but that was no excuse not to build it. And now they've passed their shipbuilding tools to us. Those tools are in our hands. Utah would say it's our turn now to get building, and guess what? One day that ship will sail. And I believe, like Utah did, that one day that ship will sail to a world of economic justice and peace. Yes, I have hope, and I'm told it's maybe because I'm a Sagittarius. I don't know anything about the zodiac. We're supposed to be obnoxiously optimistic. I don't know. But of course, I have hope. If Germany can reimagine itself after being freed from the unimaginable, then America can certainly heal herself too. I have the kind of hope that Václav Havel, defined by Václav Havel, a political dissident who was imprisoned more times than he could recall and who went on to become the leader of a free Czechoslovakia. Havel described hope as, quote, not the certainty that things will turn out well, but the conviction that some things are worth doing no matter how they turn out. The ACLU, for those who do not know, is a civil rights organization that has been trying to do the right thing, regardless of how things turn out, for 105 years. And I may be a bit biased, but I've never been more thankful for the existence of this scrappy ragtag group of people. I'm lucky to count among my friends back in Charleston the Reverend Jim Lewis, who was the first person to perform a same-sex marriage in a West Virginia church way back in the early 70s and faced calls for his termination for doing so. Reverend Lewis said to me the last time we saw each other, "Thank God for the ACLU." So let's talk about it a little bit. And let's talk a little bit about the work that's in front of us. I remember the first time I heard about the ACLU. I'm dating myself a bit here, but I was a kid in the 90s, and I was up late watching a show called MTV News with Kurt Loder. Courtney Love appeared on screen, and I have a note here to explain to young people who Courtney Love is, so don't worry. She was this sort of cultural icon of the 90s, like grunge scene. The MTV, oh, there she is. The MTV News crew was on location outside of a big ACLU fundraiser, and they asked Courtney, as she emerged, why she was supporting this organization. And she said something like, "No one's more punk than the ACLU because they're not afraid to piss off everyone." I was transfixed. I needed to know more. So I ended up writing a paper about the ACLU and reading a bunch of books from the library about it. And now I admit it is a bit surreal to be the old person standing here sharing this information with young people, but I'll get over it. During our 105 years, we have seen 18 US presidents come and go. That's 9 Republicans and 9 Democrats, from Woodrow Wilson to Donald Trump. And they all had one thing in common. They were all dragged to court by the ACLU, and they violated people's rights. We don't give a hoot about political parties, and we don't endorse candidates for office. We defend the rights of all as they are enshrined in the Constitution, and we view those enumerated rights as the floor, not the ceiling, for how people's rights should be protected. And when one right starts to bump up against another right, we wrestle with that and we find a way forward. In other words, the Bill of Rights is where we start. Then we want to expand the promise of the Bill of Rights to protect everyone in our country, especially those who have been historically denied that promise. Remember, this great agreement of ours left out a lot of us when it was first developed. But while we don't endorse politicians or take partisan sides, we also cannot create false equivalencies. Times have always been scary for many of us, Black and brown communities, the LGBTQ+ community, immigrants. The list goes on and on. But the times we're living in now are their own kind of scary. They should give us all concern, and they should stir us out of passivity and into action. Unfortunately, throughout history, we see people make the same mistake. They think, the dictator will be my dictator. But the thing is, it never turns out that way. Because when an authoritarian seizes power, he no longer needs the little people who got him there. Authoritarians often imprison, torture, and kill their own people. No one is safe when we go back on our great agreement. Donald Trump was president for 2 hours when he declared war on the Constitution, when he tried to repeal the 14th Amendment with a simple decree. The 14th Amendment should be sacred to us all. It's how our country began to come to terms with the great sin of slavery, because it answered the question, how will we handle these people who suddenly have freedom? And we decided as a nation that if you are born here, you are one of us, and that is that. And we are not ever going back on that. And we repeatedly opposed the man who came both after and before Trump, President Biden, when Biden's administration began to implement some of the very immigration policies he had previously criticized Trump for, like family separation, the ACLU took his administration to court too, and we said it over and over. It became like a mantra for us. Unconstitutional when Trump did it, still unconstitutional when Biden does it. We lost some friends over that one for a bit, but that's okay. Yes, we've sued every president during our history, but none more than Donald Trump. Today is September 16th. It's been just 8 months since he was sworn into office, but I'm proud to say we, the ACLU National, and the 54 affiliates have already filed more than 150 legal actions against this off-the-rails administration. And a few of those legal actions came from right here in West Virginia. But while these times are scary, they are not totally unprecedented. In fact, much of what's happening today mirrors the early days of the ACLU, as well as the circumstances that first brought us to the hills of West Virginia. In 1917, the U.S. was fully engulfed in the First World War, and millions of Americans were asking why they had to go and die, kill or be killed in a foreign land for a conflict that no one seemed capable of explaining to them. What resulted was the nation's first large-scale anti-war movement. And the crackdown on that movement was swift. Organizers were targeted with the full force of the law, and sometimes by extra legal means. In Mountain View Cemetery in Butte, Montana, you can find the grave of Frank Little, a copper miner and labor organizer who resisted the war. A boss's war, he called it. If the rich want war, let them do the fighting. Frank was brutally lynched, left hanging under a railroad bridge. The next day, 3,000 Union brothers and sisters marched silently through the streets of Butte to carry him to his final resting place, where his grave marker still reads to this day, slain by capitalist interests for inspiring his fellow man. Frank is one of the names we know, but there were thousands of others who were rounded up, many of them immigrants, who were summarily deported without due process under the Espionage Act. So many others were simply disappeared, their names and their voices snuffed out like a light. Sound familiar? This is the cauldron that forged the ACLU, or the Civil Liberties Bureau, as it was originally called, formed to protect the free speech rights of conscientious objectors. And toward the end of the war, we saw a ratcheting up of this lawlessness by our government during the Palmer raids, when the FBI, under the supervision of J. Edgar Hoover, began mass roundups of foreign-born workers, accusing them of being anarchists and communists, deporting thousands more without giving them their day in court. But we came out of that time, didn't we? We not only came out of it, but we came out of it with the structure of the 8-hour day. We banned child labor. We built the scaffolding upon which mine health and safety laws would be based. Oh, and by the way, we got this thing called a weekend. Pretty radical stuff, huh? This same history is also part of how the ACLU's co-founder, Roger Baldwin, found himself in our state just a few years later. The ACLU was operating in West Virginia by late 1922 and early 1923, making all kinds of good trouble with the miners and their supporters. Now today, we hear a lot of feedback on our work, often from the news media, bless their hearts. And it usually goes something like, the ACLU once stood for something, but they've really lost their way. It's like our critics think that we were this neutral third party in the story of the US before we became some wide-eyed radical group. I think history begs to differ. The ACLU, as I said before, has always been pushing the envelope, trying to take our country to the next step, carrying our collective conscience forward. We look at the Bill of Rights and we say, yes, and. So if the theories of our critics are right, then surely if I went digging in the state's news archives, I would find praise for our work back in our halcyon days, back when we first started doing work in the state, right? Well, digging we went, and we found some news articles written about the ACLU's first visit to the state back in the 1920s. That's what they were saying about us back then, so I guess we've been losing our way since 1920. I'll let that one speak for itself. This is the Raleigh Register, March 1923. For those who aren't aware, the Battle of Blair Mountain had just occurred. It was the largest labor uprising in U.S. history, and it might not have been taught to you in your West Virginia history class, and there's a reason for that. The history of labor in this country is suppressed. So just briefly, it went sort of like this. Coal miners lived in appalling conditions. In exchange for their backbreaking labor, they owned nothing. They were paid with a currency known as scrip, which could only be used in stores owned by the mines. So the company made everything back. They didn't even own their own homes. The company owned those too. And when they tried to organize a union, the company would kick them out and make them live in tents and shacks, even the families with pregnant women and babies. A series of events, including mass evictions and firings and the assassination of pro-labor Matewan Police Chief Sid Hatfield, led to some 10,000 armed miners facing off against private security forces backed by the coal companies, who of course wanted to perpetuate the miners' servitude. And here again enters Mother Jones. Mother Jones comes to the area, and she's reportedly standing at the heads of these haulers, you know, her skirt dragging in the mud, calling out to people that if you'll be free from slavery, then come and follow me and the United Mine Workers. And she was said to have recruited 3,000 miners that way, on her feet. The miners lost after the National Guard was called in. Many of the miners had served in the war and refused to take up arms against fellow soldiers. And of course, the coal companies began bombing them from airplanes. In the following weeks and months, the coal companies and the courts they more or less owned went on a prosecutorial blitz. I can recall a story from our former executive director, Hillary Shiz, about a hog farmer who, as a Christian man, allowed some of the marching miners to sleep in his barn and provided them a meal before sending them on their way. He wound up facing criminal charges himself for aiding and abetting. But the ACLU helped him find an attorney who got those charges dropped. Decades later, his granddaughter was still grateful when she relayed the story to Hillary. Roger didn't stop there, though. He gave speeches across the region in defense of free speech. They've got headlines like that written, and about the rights of miners to organize. He found attorneys to defend the miners against the charges, and he circulated pamphlets criticizing the coal companies and law enforcement. And the ACLU went on through the next century, racking up victories, both legal and cultural, because even when we lose a battle in court, we still got people talking about issues they might otherwise avoid. Battle of Blair Mountain. A few of our cases. There was the Scopes trial, argued by the great Clarence Darrow, referred to by many historians as the greatest lawyer of the 20th century, challenging a law criminalizing the teaching of Darwin's theory of evolution. We took the first gay rights case in the country in Boston in 1935, and we lost. A decade later, during the height of World War II nationalism, we won a case right here in West Virginia on behalf of Jehovah's Witness students who refused to salute the flag because their religion forbade it. And they were told they couldn't attend school anymore until they agreed to salute the flag. It remains one of the landmark cases barring the government from compelling speech. It's known as Barnett v. West Virginia School Board. Across the country at the same time, the Northern California affiliate fought valiantly against the internment of Japanese Americans, but lost. We won the right to interracial marriage in Loving v. Virginia, and we fought for the religious rights of indigenous people, secured the right to marriage regardless of gender, and on and on. But I don't know a single person who agrees with the ACLU on everything. We have some out there views sometimes. That includes employees of the organization, by the way. When your number one issue is free speech, you have to be tolerant of dissent within your own ranks. So I will say we all agree the organization is flawed, but we push forward nevertheless. We famously enraged some of our most steadfast supporters in 1978 when we argued for the rights of neo-Nazis to march in an Illinois town. And we did so while loudly labeling their speech as evil. We defended President Trump when he was banned from social media platforms in the wake of January 6th. And just last year, we represented the NRA when the New York Attorney General's office singled out the organization for its political viewpoints. Here in West Virginia, our affiliate employs 16 passionate, deeply intelligent, committed advocates. This team makes me proud every day. We fight in the courts, in the legislature, and in the streets to make West Virginia a better, more just place. The digital age may force us to reckon with some of our long-held beliefs. For example, the old adage of sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Is it still true, given how much we know about human psychology, when we know social media bullying has clearly driven so many people to self-harm? Is it still true when we understand the psychosocial impacts of things like racism and transphobia? We have to wrestle with it. These things aren't always so cut and dry. But we hold true to the principle that if we are only defending the speech of those with whom we agree, then we do not really support free speech at all. And that kind of gets me back to the idea of the Great Agreement, because we're also, as we are all aware in this room, living in politically violent times. But those who claim that violence has no place in our political system, they forget our blood-soaked history. From slavery to the genocide of indigenous people, to endless wars, to the war on the poor. And please always remember that imprisoning someone for the so-called crime of being homeless is an act of violence. I hear people say that in America we don't kill people for their ideas, but we waged a war in Vietnam to combat the spread of communism, didn't we? Violence is everywhere in our politics, it always has been, but violence should have no place in our discourse. And we have the tools to make that happen. Remember those shipbuilding tools from Sojourner and all the others. We have the tools to live alongside one another without bloodshed. We have the wealth to ensure that all people may live with basic human dignity. And we have the intelligence to recognize that rights are not pie, that new rights for a historically marginalized group do not mean fewer rights for the historically privileged. And we can use that intelligence to settle our disputes through reasoned debate and not with bullets and bombs, as we have unfortunately done time and time again. But to have that, we must first have empathy. We must see each other as fully human. We must insist that authoritarianism be shown the door, no matter what party it represents. We must live and allow our neighbors to live their lives as well, and I agree with Jesus and Mr. Rogers here. Neighbor means everyone. I've shared the words of a lot of my heroes tonight. It feels fitting then that I would leave you with the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who was deeply hated and maligned when he was alive, not just for his views on racial equality, but also his views on capitalism and war. When asked about violence that had broken out against his wishes at a civil rights demonstration, he replied that a riot is the language of the unheard. And that, in a nutshell, is a big part of why we do what we do. Let's make sure that the otherwise voiceless are heard. The alternative is unacceptable, and in my view, it's un-American. Thank you.
Questions for Mr. Wolf? I've got, I guess not the question, but a comment. I am a huge fan of free speech and especially anti-censorship. I think it's very brave that your organization doesn't pick and
Yeah, thank you for that. It also, puts us in a position to, they're getting free help from us, right? So we can also tell the world that they're evil while we represent them, so we get free speech too.
Are there any more questions?
As a trained journalist, I'm very good at the pregnant pause.
I tell my students I can wait you out.
I can wait you out. Okay.
In your experience, what do you think is the most misunderstood constitutional right?
Oh, wow. That's not fair. What do you think is the most misunderstood constitutional right? What's that? I think that they're all misunderstood from time to time. And no constitutional right is absolute, right? We have freedom of religion, but if your religion involves human sacrifice, we're probably not going to let you do that. Sorry. So we have free speech, but you can't threaten people. There's the example of you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. And so that's where that balancing test always has to come into play when one right starts to butt up against another. But I think they're all misunderstood from time to time, and they can be weaponized.
Yeah, I was wondering if because the political climate has gotten so increasingly charged, is it scary? Is it dangerous to work for the ACLU?
Well, according to the news today, the administration is going to label left-wing groups as terrorists and take our passports away or something like that. There is that. I have an undocumented coworker. She's our immigrants' rights coordinator. She's quite public about the fact that she's undocumented. She has DACA, so she has a thin layer of protection. But I'm very scared for her, always. Folks who look like me, less so. But we have some really vulnerable people on our staff, and we often when we're winning, there are some threats, and we have safety protocols, that we follow as a staff. But I couldn't stand here and say I feel unsafe, given how unsafe, so many of our neighbors are. It's scary, but thank you for the question.
What do you think, let's get local for a second, the greatest civil rights issue facing West Virginia is at this point?
Oh. Well, West Virginia, I think almost from our founding, has been kind of an extraction colony. And we make these cases that you're losing people are leaving, you're enacting these regressive policies. And we make those arguments because they would work on us, because we want people to live here and be happy here. It doesn't always work on our policymakers. I think they're fine with people leaving as long as there's enough people here to extract the resources and make things work.
In a political climate so divisive, in a state that is part of a country that is both so divided, how do you calm people that get so heated so easily, just through conversation? How do you kind of talk to friends or family and make us agree with all things?
You kind of said it, talking to people, putting the phone down, being mindful of your heart rate, being mindful of that blood pressure, be mindful of the people who are pushing your buttons. I start to get into it with people on social media sometimes, and I'm like, you're paid for that. Stop giving away your work for free. You got to tell yourself what you got to tell yourself to back away from this stuff sometimes. It starts with talking. I have family members who I really struggle to find a single thing right now that we agree on, and it's tough. It's tough, but it has to start with human to human interaction, I think, and just put the phone down. Delete the apps off your phone if you need to. We're on pretty much, gonna make a hypocrite out of me. We're on all of the social medias. We have a website. You can get in touch with us there. We have not a big presence down here, unfortunately, but we do organize rallies. We have a Capital Policy Day that we invite people to. We also have lots of partner organizations. We help support them in their Capital Days. So those basically work as we get a bunch of people together. We, educate them about the issues. We talk to them about how to go about talking to lawmakers, and then we'll take you around through the Capitol and we'll knock on doors and try to make them listen to you. We have a lot of volunteer opportunities around the state. We try to announce those as best we can. We also have a youth organizer, and if you want to see me after this, I'll give you her contact information. Her name is Ocean Smith, and she's amazing.
So I know that your background is in journalism. Can you, for the students, can you give them kind of an idea of the various backgrounds of the other folks that you work with, folks elsewhere in the organization?
Sure. So we have two litigators who work on our staff. We have a paralegal who assists them. Our largest staff is our organizing staff. So we have 5 people there. We have an immigrants' rights coordinator, who I mentioned earlier, youth, trans justice organizer, a generalist organizer, and a faith organizer. We have our administrative team, so those are folks who run our office and do our accounting and all of that. Our communications team is mostly me. I have an investigative reporter. And our advocacy team, those are our lobbyists. That's like the nice word for a lobbyist. There are 2 of them, and their backgrounds come from all over the place. But the head of our advocacy team is Rusty Williams. He's amazing. He's a cancer survivor and a patient advocate. I credit him almost exclusively for our medical cannabis bill, our medical cannabis law in West Virginia.
Can you tell us a little bit about some case that ACLU West Virginia is working on right now?
Sure. We have a lot right now. We have a lawsuit challenging West Virginia's National Guard deployment to DC. We're the only state that's challenging this in court. And the reason for that is the Battle of Blair Mountain. Following Blair Mountain, there were a number of legal battles fought. And it created contours, it created restrictions in state law for the conditions under which the governor may deploy the Guard. Other states don't have these restrictions. So we're putting those to the test right now. We could hear back on that very soon. Probably our most contentious lawsuit, if we want to just jump into that right now, involves vaccine exemptions. So it's a long story, but West Virginia's law, state law, says there are no religious exemptions or philosophical exemptions. The legislature took up a bill to change that during the legislative session, and they shot it down. They did not pass it. We also have on the books a religious freedom law. The governor then issued a executive order that he says grants those religious and philosophical exemptions under the religious freedom law. And it gets a bit nuanced and a bit wonky here, even though everybody's really, really keyed up and fired up about this. But basically, the religious freedom law allows an individual to bring a case to a judge and say, this is why I should have an exemption. It does not grant, in our view, a governor to, with a stroke of a pen, give everybody in the state the option to just not get vaccinated and still attend public school. And so that's the challenge that we have. The motion to dismiss our case was just denied, so our case is continuing forward.
You back there in the green jacket, I saw you with your hand up. Yeah.
It seems we're experiencing a frontal attack on public education in this state. We have provisions in the state constitution that require thorough and efficient education that inform the case that equalize state support across the counties. But now it seems that there's an unmasked attack on public education. What, if anything, can we do, and what, if anything, are you contemplating to reverse what's happening in public education?
That's another really good one, and it's tough. It would appear that the courts have said that the Hope Scholarship is constitutional. We had our own feelings about that, but there's not a whole lot we can do on that front, and I think that is one of the biggest areas where we're seeing this attack. We are seeing funding for our public schools siphoned away and sent even out of state in some cases. I don't know. I don't have the answer to that for you right now, but it is a very big concern, and it's something that is talked about on probably a weekly basis on our staff. It's something we're watching. I can't really talk about any prospective lawsuits that may be coming, but it is something that we're watching. I wish I had a better answer.
I guess a follow-up question. What kind of research capability do you have internally?
In terms of the law,
In studying issues such as that?
we have immense resources, honestly, through ACLU National. With obviously our staff is pretty small, but we have really extensive resources through our national office. And we have a huge team, I think, of some of the best litigators in the country working there. And so we're very rarely working on anything alone. There have been a few issues that have been so hyper state specific that we just took them on our own, but for the most part, we're very involved with national and with other state affiliates.
One more follow-up.
Sure.
The strategy, which it seems to have been effective over those 105 years, is to bring cases to effect change. It seems that we're in an era in which desired decisions are emanating from the court and are being ignored, and in fact ignored with some pride. Do you have strategies for dealing with that kind of situation?
I think that there's certainly been some malicious compliance. And I do want to clarify that I think everybody here knows I'm not an attorney, so I can't speak fully on behalf of our attorneys. But it's a really scary time when you see a kind of a thumbing of a nose at court orders, or a very bad faith reading of what a court order says, which we saw in some of these deportation cases. What I will say is that we're not going to win every case. We've never really approached things from that angle. But one thing, I actually only recently learned that we lost the Scopes trial. Because you can teach evolution in schools, right? I always kind of assumed that we had won that one. No, we lost that. But it was a great opportunity for conversation. It was a great way to shed light on this issue and show the unjustness of it. And so that's a huge part of what we do too. We talk, we go into the media, we organize rallies, we do everything that we can to hold elected officials accountable. But it is a very troubling time when you see indications, and it's happened before. It's not unprecedented. You had, was it Andrew Jackson out there saying he's issued his ruling, now let him come enforce it. It's scary times.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
I would like to know what Supreme Court case you think every college student needs to know about and why.
Well, there's Tinker v. Des Moines. That was a case during the Vietnam War that students were wearing armbands to protest the Vietnam War, and they were getting expelled for it. We won that case, and it found that, now of course laws are a little different as they affect college students to primary school to high school, but what the Supreme Court found there was that students do not shed their right to free speech at the classroom door. And so I think that's a good one.
I didn't follow up on something that happened shortly after the administration took office. The president decided at some point that he would decide who could ask him questions at a press conference. As a journalist, was there ever any addressing that or resolving that? And was that considered an abridgment? Freedom of the press?
It should be. It certainly should be.
Is there any resolution for that?
It was egregious. It's an ongoing thing. The problem is the same problem that you see with media outlets that have capitulated, who've been sued and immediately settled. There was no case against them, but they immediately settled for millions and millions of dollars. CBS, et cetera. When you're a journalist, you need access. And that depends on having good faith actors to some degree that you're covering. If they have no good faith at all and they're just going to completely abuse the system, what is there to do about that? Because, yeah, they could take it to court, they could fight it, and then they're going to lose more access in the meantime. What I would like to see is less obeying in advance. I see a lot of that. There's the nickname for Trump when it comes to the economics. Trump always what is it? Taco. Yeah. He also backs down a lot when you fight back. When you take him to court, when you hold him accountable and you don't let him get away with it. I'd like to see more of that. But, it's the ball is kind of in the media's court. They have to bring these suits. They have to challenge it instead of capitulating the way so many of them have.
Why do you think people just gave in? I mean, that's been my biggest thing, is it seems like everybody just after the November election just gave up, packed their stuff from Washington and said, good luck. It's a pretty hopeless feeling in a lot of cases. I mean, there are people in this state, there are people around the country
silence and there's nobody coming for them.
Yeah. It was incredibly deflating. But I am seeing pockets of resistance here and there and everywhere. I'm seeing these massive marches, these No Kings marches. I'm seeing the lawsuits pile up. Who knows what the Supreme Court's going to do with them, but a lot of wins in the lower courts, a lot of wins. I think there's a little bit of a deferential nature to Americans, and we want to believe that our system works and that our system, but I think there's a lot of us out there who would say it's never worked for us. We kind of need the majority to wake up.
What do you think about the rise of evangelical Puritanism and the threat that that's posing to our American I think that church and state would be separated.
Could you say that last part again?
I think that church and state should be separated.
Yeah. Yes. We have the free exercise clause, but we also have separation of church and state. We are a freedom of religion organization. If someone wants to be an evangelical Puritan, or I don't recall exactly how you described it, but if they want to be that is their choice. The injection of it into our government, which is nothing new, is always standing in the way, I think, of real liberty for people.
I know it's been an issue for sure for the past three presidential terms. How much do you think that that interjection of religion has really affected us, especially now in this political climate where it seems that freedom of religion is being attacked if you are not specifically a Christian in this nation? We've seen plenty of times with even our highest of politicians, such as Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, where it seems that specifically Islam is being continuously attacked day in and day out because it's different from them. Do you think this will continue even with the change of administration, or do you think this is just a temporary thing that we're going to be able to get over?
I think that type of religious bigotry is very closely intertwined with racism, and racism doesn't know a party in this country. And I think that is an issue that's, especially when it comes to Islam, has been ratcheted up since I was in high school, since 9/11. It's been taken to an all new level, and we've seen racist immigration policies. We have seen mosques bugged. We have seen all kinds of intrusions into the religious freedom, particularly of Muslims in this country under both Democrat and Republican administrations. And it's something that we've opposed quite actively through lawsuits. But I think that it is here to stay. Well, not maybe to stay, but it's here. It's here for now. All right. Well, thank you all again so much. I really appreciate it.
On behalf of the Political Science Department, we just want to thank everybody for taking the time out of your evening to join us here tonight. And another big thank you to our speaker, Billy Wolf. If we can all give him another round of well-deserved applause. As a little Mountain Lion gift, we got you a mug and a keychain from our bookstore to take with you. And everybody have a great night and be safe getting home. Thank you so much for coming.